You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. Today's guest, Sylvia Moore Myers, is an experienced entrepreneur, author, and business consultant with over 30 years of expertise. Certified mental health, life coaching, and crisis intervention, she is the founder and CEO of Gold Scars, LLC. Sylvia authored Gold Scars, offering insights into grief, loss, and trauma. As a sought-out speaker, she inspires audiences to embrace SCAR, strength, courage, adaptability, resilience, and navigate healing through her 7 to Heal method. Welcome, Sylvia.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the long and beautiful intro.
Well, it sounds like you've done so much, and especially with this idea of grief and being able to process that, the intro is probably only a touching on the surface of what you've been able to accomplish. But I'd love to get the backstory and understand a little bit of what brought you into entrepreneurship, authorship, grief recovery to begin with.
Well, you would think it would have started in 2003. In 2003, my teenage son was on his way home, pulled into a gas station, bought a Snickers bar and a Mountain Dew that he was going to bring to his girlfriend on his way home. It was around Christmas time. So we were about halfway putting the Christmas tree up. So he was getting home that evening so we could finish it off in the morning. And he was robbed and shot and became an organ donor that evening as a result of that shooter. He got shot in the head. And so when we got to the hospital, he was still breathing. His hand would move if you held it, his foot would jump if you tickled it. But obviously, after about 5 brain scans, we knew that he wasn't going to make it. Right? It was. So we walked out of the me too. We walked out of the hospital that night. My other younger 2 children, myself and my husband, walked out, knowing that we were going to pick a coffin out for a child that was still warm when we walked away, that the next time we saw him, he would be in a coffin that we had picked out that next day. It was very difficult for our entire family. And so the grief was, as you can imagine, just astronomical. 8 months later, I was on my way home. I had met some friends, literally went to the grocery store, talking to everybody outside, and then got in my car and drove home. And I was followed by who I thought was a friend of mine, just kind of checking, just make sure I got home okay. It wasn't that late, but just making sure. And turned out it was a would-be serial killer. I'm laughing because it was like, really? 8 months after my son. Literally fought with him fist and glove in my own driveway, and I did get away. He went to jail. And I realized at that very second that I wasn't just fighting him because I had to survive, because I was so depressed. I was so distraught. I wasn't even a good mom to my kids, and the fact that I didn't know how to help them heal either, right? But I looked at the door where my kids were on the other side, and I said, I have to live because I have to make sure they live. Because if he killed me, there's no doubt in my mind that he was going to walk in and hurt my children as well. So fast forward, I started the grief process, right? I started to say, why don't I feel healed? A year went by, another year went by. Just everything was compounding on top of it. And I realized that I wasn't healing because I couldn't heal, that healing really was a misnomer. We don't really heal, do we? We scar. You cut yourself, you scar. We're not a chameleon. We're not a, sea cucumber that grows back in Oregon in about a week. The animal world, animal kingdoms tends to heal, but we don't. We scar. And that was the first inkling that I had that maybe there's something to this. Maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place for that. So I started the grieving process. I started the healing process. And in that process, I thought I was going to start with my son's death, right? Seemed logical, right? I did not. I went all the way back to my childhood and picked up where I was first injured, that very first time, that injury as a child, neglect. And I dealt with that first. And I brought that through that system basically that I started to create of healing one problem at a time, addressing one person or one situation. I survived cancer. I basically talked to cancer about you're not going to bother me anymore. The death of my son, I ended up the same year that my son died. I buried my first brother, my oldest brother. My mom and myself buried our firstborn children in the same year. I had another brother die of a heart attack a few years later. He was young, 51 or 2. My sister died as a result of accident that caused her to die. She also was young. I buried my mom and my dad, and all of that took place during the healing process. So it was just like a compounding
Wow.
thing, right? So I decided it's like I'm gonna take this one step further because I'm that kind of person. I'm like, if I'm going to be good at grief and loss and recovery, I want to be an expert on it. So I started studying. I got certified in grief recovery, became a first responder, and I started walking through people through that same process. And that was what led to writing the book. I was helping one person or maybe 10 at the most. Maybe the most I could gather together in person was 3 or 4 people, but I was getting hundreds of calls and I could not do that. And that's why I wrote the book. And I told the story of my grief in my life. And in the end of the book or halfway through, I walk them through how to deal with each one of those. And the whole goal is to be happy again, really, to be, you get help and you be healthy again and you eat right and you take care of yourself and you pay back, because that's how you feel joy, is when you give joy. And all of those concepts really do lead to having happiness. You can't bring back the person you lost. And I didn't need a way to forget what happened to myself or to my son. I needed a better way to remember. And that's what the book is about, a better way to heal, a better way to remember, and just really to embrace what's happened to you. We're human. You're not going to get through life without something that's happened to you. And grief, even for children, grief sometimes is moving across town.
Well, I appreciate the perspective that you have on that. And as you're going through this and you're talking through each of these steps, I'm almost like I'm kind of a little bit shocked. I don't know that we have all those skills to start processing and working through grief, even though, as you mentioned, we've been experiencing it our whole lives. We've experienced trauma our whole lives, and we kind of wait for that catastrophic event to start addressing it.
We should.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's like, we get to that point where it's like, wow, I need these skills now. And sometimes we forget to build them throughout the process. Is that kind of some of the thought process that you were working through?
Here's the problem. You see, about 100 years ago, we started breaking grief in this country. We broke it. It was working just fine. Grandma would pass away and everybody would go to the house where grandma lives, and the family would be there and we'd eat food, and that's where she would be laid out in the parlor or wherever it was called. And the children would be there and we would see that we lost grandma, and we modeled grief for our children. And somewhere in the last 100 years, we've decided that a foreign building, a place where we've never been before, is better. And we're going to leave the kids at home because it might be too traumatic for them to have to go through that again. And we don't prepare our children for grief. I wasn't prepared for the grief that I went through as a child. And I watched a lot of people die. I lost my first babysitter. She's to suicide. My grandmother was my first person that I lost, and I was 7 years old. And those types of modeling of what do you do when you lose someone, I had a lot of questions and there was never any answers. So we tend to want to protect our kids. I'm sorry, you need to model how to grieve. It is okay to have a loss. And we have tragedy. We deal with cancer. We deal with accidents. I've fallen a lot as a child and even as an adult, and almost lost my life several times for that. Those are grief events, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that we forget that our children need to learn how to pull themselves through that, because the honest to goodness truth is we do have that resilience, we do have that strength, it is actually there, we do adapt our lives. But when you don't know how, or that it's okay to do that, you start thinking there's something wrong with you. It's like, what did I do, what have I done wrong, or did I cause the children usually blame themselves, no matter what it is. Small children blame themselves for whatever happened.
Absolutely. And when you're discussing kind of the lens of a child and being able to kind of go through that process, that you almost have to really take a step back and take that perspective and understand what that feeling and how that grief is being processed by a child.
Sure.
Our show focuses a lot on neurodivergence. As I would imagine, is that you're not going to experience grief every single person the same way. It's that
Not
the
easy.
concept, the experience, all that's so different. What's unique with somebody who's neurodivergent that
Sure.
might be going through the grieving process?
Let's talk about that, because when I was writing the book, I think I shared this with you earlier. I discovered that I was autistic. I had suspected my mother was. I can do a whole show just on that, brother. But it's the second book that's coming out. But I realized that I had suffered through grief as an autistic child as well. So what might affect a neurotypical child badly is compounded times 100 in an autistic child's brain. So that almost go into PTSD every time some kind of event happens, and there's no one standing there to pull you out of it. So a lot of times you have a shock, especially an autistic child, neurodivergent child. They have a shock from a grief, a move, a divorce. That's like a death,
Hmm.
right? And if you don't prepare them for it in advance, that's like any surprise thing. It's going to uproot them and upset them, and you're going to have a long period up to that recovery. And that's the long period to the beginning of the recovery. But if you prepare the child that we're getting a puppy and we love this puppy, but one day this puppy is only going to, this puppy's going to be on earth for about 14 years, 15 years, maybe, if we're lucky. And we're going to have to say goodbye to this puppy one day. It's really sad, but we're going to just spoil it to death while it's here. Yay. And we're going to take good care of it. When my husband's mad at me for the dogs being on the couch, I just remind him they're only on earth for 13 to 15 years. We're going to spoil them right. Their life on earth is short, but we don't prepare with children, therefore think animals live forever, grandmas live forever, grandpas live forever, and no one can die.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, you have to have those conversations with every child.
Yeah, and it's not unique to neurodivergence. Is that I would imagine every single child needs to have those conversations. I've seen adults who haven't processed the ability or the what you just discussed as far as kind of the livelihood of somebody having a temporal existence. Is that like the dog it will leave, like it's going to happen. It's
I
still going
bring
to be sad. It's going to bring grief, but you're prepared for it. You understand it.
I help adults all the time with grief recovery from a loss of a pet.
Hmm.
It is hard. I mean, when that pet is your person, if that pet is your comfort and your friend and your mate, your TV buddy,
Yeah.
when you lose that person, it's a great loss. Um, so for a child, even more so. But we tend to not know what to do. We get slapped in the face with grief, and then we just stand there, and it's like,
Hmm. And then you're stuck, like you don't know what to do. But you spoke not just of grief, you spoke of trauma. And one of the unique things I've spoken so frequently with folks who have experienced what they would almost describe as micro traumas growing up, who are neurodivergent, is that little things of the way the community has responded to them, their parents maybe have responded to them, or just life experiences have consistently built up, and these micro traumas create a very difficult way to be able to interact with the environment and the community and feel empowered. what would you be looking at in that situation? Because it seems as almost as if we should have been working on all of this ability to process trauma during
Right.
these micro trauma stages and not waiting for somebody to need to have a major intervention through a therapeutic event to
Right.
be able to get to that.
Yeah, precisely. Every child is different. And when you're talking autism, every child is different, right? With one child, maybe you're not going to have a long, drawn out conversation about people dying in their life. Grandma's great today. You're not going to have that next conversation. But with just about every other child, especially I was a vocal autistic. I did a lot of repeating of adults what they said, but someone could have spoken to me, I would have understood them, right? And you could have had those conversations with me as a child. If that is the case, then those are conversations you need to start having with the child now to prepare them for those changes. With an autistic child, you need to prepare them for a move. Don't put a sign in the front yard and then tell your child the house is for sale, right? You want to have that experience beforehand and talk about what's going to happen and set those expectations. You can set the expectations for things that could happen in the
Mhm.
future. And then make sure that they know that you're there for this and you've been through this, and you can give them some examples of how you dealt with it, and model what grief and trauma looks like. When you have trauma, and I've had trauma, you don't expect it.
Mhm.
My child was killed and close to home, and then I was also attacked by a stranger in my driveway. That is trauma. It led to PTSD. The same process, though, that I healed from the loss of my grandmother is the same process that I used to heal from attack of a serial killer. It is still the steps: getting the help first, staying healthy, keep, putting all of those things in place in a nice pattern and trying to be happy again. I think one of the worst things that we do to ourselves, besides our children, is that we think because something bad has happened to us that we're not allowed to laugh anymore, that we're not allowed to, have fun or make fun of stuff or even laugh out loud, but it was okay.
Mhm.
And I think we forget that one of the greatest healing mechanisms we have in our brain is the chemicals that are caused by a simple smile. And we need to teach our children to smile all the time. I smile all the time.
Yeah.
And I teach that to people. You can smile, you can fake a smile, and it still does things inside of your brain and helps your body to heal.
Yeah.
So
No,
it's okay.
it's hard to do that. I mean, you're experiencing something so tragic and something that, you're not ready for, like you described. And your initial kind of response is, I'm going to shut down. But then I see
Yeah.
everybody else expecting that out of me. And that's kind of the hard part, is how do you get that balance? One of the things I think you mentioned to me is that you almost start blaming yourself, devaluing yourself, kind of doubting yourself through the process. And I see this with young adults with autism, where they've been told no so many times, or maybe they did self-injurious behavior and now they think that there's something wrong with them, instead of realizing that the wrong part might be I didn't have a supportive environment around me that made
Right.
me feel good about everything else I was contributing at the same time. And they focused on this one thing that they felt like I needed to change. Is that the same sort of compounding of trauma that builds up over time, where it's like, I start thinking less of myself. I start living the life that others are expecting I should be feeling, instead of feeling good or feeling proud of my accomplishments.
Yeah. As an autistic person, you rethink every conversation after you've had it, right? You walk away, and then for the next 2 hours to 3 days, you relive the entire conversation. That's kind of typical with my brain as an autistic person, and all of us. It compound that with, hey, now what am I going to do with my 16-year-old who just lost his brother, who is his best friend? How am
Hmm.
I going deal with a 7-year-old that loss of his brother. When is it going to hit them both the hardest? Well, I'll tell you when it hit them. When they both turned 19, when the age of Jacob, when he died, that's when they dealt with it the hardest.
Mm.
And so that was a long period of time in between, right? That I had to get them to that point.
Yep.
And I knew that it was coming. But yeah, I had to be there. One of the parts of my book that is my favorite part, I want to pull it out and just print it just for funeral parlors. What a horrible word, right? Funeral parlor. They stole that from grandma's house, by the way. With grandma in the parlor, yeah. But it's all the bad things that people say to you when your child dies or when anybody dies. It's like, God needed him in heaven. His work on earth was done. And I would always answer, because I'm a smart ass. I would say, what was he working on and why did he finish so soon? Or you're telling me that God woke up on December the 6th and said, I need Jacob up here, stat. And I don't care how you do it. That's not the God that I serve. But we do that to people. We put that additional burden on them that for some reason it was okay for that person to die, or that it was destined, or you need to be strong for your other children. Really? You think? Duh. But we overburden them. The worst thing we do at funerals is we stand in line for an hour to 2 hours to torture the people at the other end standing by the person that they lost.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know what to say because in the English language, and you can search your heart and your mind right now, but there are 0 words in the English language on what to say to someone who has just lost someone they love. There's no words.
No.
So we kind of try to think up something like, I'm so sorry. Well, that one's good, right? But I'm sorry for your loss. My condolences. That's from your boss, not from you, right? Yeah, but the other things that we say are all wrong. The best thing to do, say nothing. Just hug, love, and move on.
Yeah.
And I still say we pull them out of the funeral parlor and we put them back in grandma's parlor, right?
Yep.
And we
I
bring
almost
them.
feel like sometimes we say something only it's almost for us. Like it's almost like, I'm
Liz,
saying it because I feel like I need to say something here
that's
and I'm going to
That's
say
what,
something.
that's what we trained our children to do. That's what I said. We broke grief 100 years ago. We broke it. It was doing good until we pulled it out of the home and we threw it into a strange building. As an autistic child going to a place I've never been before, why is grandma there?
Mm-hmm.
Why is she there? We're confusing our children. And then we stand in line with them to say something to someone. Like we're going to think of something really profound before we get there. And of course we do not. It's
No,
just
I think the profound thing is like what you said. It's giving that it's giving that hug.
yeah,
It's
I
giving
love
that kind of I'm here and I'm present, but I'm just here to do whatever it is that you're telling me I need to do, which might be the hug.
That's right. I made up a word. It's in my book. It's called presentness. And
Mhm.
I tell people, have presentness. Be there. Be present for someone. That's really all they really want. They just want to know that you cared and you loved, and that at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 weeks from now, when I totally fall apart, which I will if you've lost a child, right? That you'll come over my house and sit with me again and say nothing.
Mhm.
And those are your real friends, right? Yeah.
No, for sure. And I mean, it sounds like, you took some of the experiences from your life and you probably learned a lot through those experiences. And now you've created SCAR as a way, I'm guessing, to be able to share those experiences, but also empower others. And I'd love to hear that experience of, how it is that you're utilizing those, I guess, 5 key features or 4 key features of SCAR, SCAR, to be able to kind of help people to feel like they are equipped or that they are able to continue to move forward.
Right. So one of the reasons that I put gold scars is basically what I told you before. When I lost a child, I've been through a life of bullying as a child and never really knew why. I was practically raped by my first employer and then sexually harassed by my second employer. I dropped out of law because of that, which is what I wanted to do. I dropped out of college twice. And just had that life of just one bad abuser after another. I made very poor decisions on relationships and marriages. And there was just no one there. I moved out of my house at 18. I wasn't ready. I tell people I was the child that would have been standing at the door knocking at 18 going, but I still need you. If I'd have known I was autistic or they did, they would not have let me just wander out the door, right? But getting back to the point, there was a lot of trauma in my life, and those were all becoming wounds, right? And I was desperately, after my son died, I was just looking for this cure. It's like I need a way to forget everything that's happened to me. I need a way to make it all go away. And then it hit me. Um, we scar. We don't we don't heal. We scar. We were meant to scar. We were always meant to scar. So gold scars, I used the kintsugi idea with gold scars because I didn't need a way to forget what happened to my son. I needed a better way to remember. And I needed to remember in a way that actually healed me. So the SCAR acronym is just to remind you that you can have the strength, and you can have courage and you can adapt your life to change. It's change. You can't make it go away. You gotta adapt to it, correct? You can't go backwards, you have to go forwards. And being resilient, part of healing, mending is what I call it, beautifully mending, is resilience. And it's built in and hardwired into our brain already. You just got to tap into it and decide that's what you're going to do. Or you can sit on the couch for the rest of your life and be sad. Or you can get up and say, I'm going to find ways to remember my son better. I'm going to remember the good things that happen. I'm going to get help for myself first and foremost. And I call it the 7 H's, 7 to heal. And it's just simple things like being happy and healthy, feeling your worth. I call it being holy again, feeling worthy, because I felt lousy. I was a horrible person. I let my child die. How could I do that, right? He stopped and got a Snickers bar and a Mountain Dew on his way home. That somehow in my brain, I thought it was my fault and everybody else's too, but it was the guy that killed him's fault. Right. And learning to be healthy again, because one of the things we do in grief is we forget to eat the right things and be healthy. Exercising, just simple things. And then I like to say one of the best parts of my chapter is the happy chapter. The happy chapter is about smiling again and creating those endorphins and those things in your brain, the chemicals that make you happy. Even a fake smile, as I said before, can create chemicals in your brain that can produce healing. You can literally heal from a smile. Even a fake smile works. I call it jump starting your smile. It's just faking it till you do it. And then being hilarious again, getting to that point in your life where you can tell a joke. I tell the most horrible mom jokes you could ever know. And my children make fun of me. My grandchildren do now. But I've carried that tradition on as just being a laughaholic. And it's contagious. I got my other 2 children through this grief recovery and on the other side of grief, desperate grief, by healing myself first and pulling myself through that, and then putting that towards their lives as well. And now I share it with as many people as possible as a grief recovery specialist.
I think it's easier to withdraw. I think it's easier to go through that deterioration that they were describing, and to pull away from everything during grief. And it takes a lot of work to to get to the point where you can start to have those positive experiences back in your life, start to be able to create more relationships. What's the role of the community partners? What's the role of creating that support network around you to keep you on that path, so you're not doing it by yourself?
Sure. Yeah. And I think inside of a family, you grieve together. And you grieve different, but you still grieve together. My children were grieving. My husband was grieving. Our marriage lasted 3 whole months after my son was murdered, and we got a divorce. It just didn't survive it. We're good friends now. Both of us remarried and very happy. And we co-parented during all of that time. So my children had 2 moms and 2 dads. And, but having that kind of support where it's okay for other people to grieve too. It wasn't, it was my grief. It wasn't my children's, but their grief was theirs. It wasn't mine. You
Hmm.
can't railroad someone's suffering or their grief. You got to let them get through it themselves. When they get stuck, it's really time for you to start talking about scar and the 7 to heal and getting the initial help, because the very first part of healing is help. There's nowhere else to start but there, and helping yourself get that process started is really what scar is about. You got to have that strength and that, ability to do that. You've got to have that courage, because you will get through it
Yeah.
or you won't.
Hmm.
And that's a choice. And I think that's what people forget. You're helping yourself and healing and learning how to heal. And it takes years sometimes.
Yeah.
When you're grieving with children, when you have autistic children, I have neurodivergent children, both of them, and one of them's in their 30s and the other's in his 20s. And that was quite a challenge, because we discovered that later, all three of us, right? But getting them through that in different stages, and still so. And now I have two
Yeah.
grandchildren.
But those
So
stages are key, I think, is that it's not a linear process. It's not like I can go in and say, hold on, you're in grief right now. Here's Scar, go. It's
no, no,
and you can't
no,
force somebody. Is
not
that it's
even. And it goes back to Kubler-Ross when she said there's stages of grief. She was right. There are stages of grief, but the process and the timing of each and where they come in and out of your life is not linear. It's not, okay, I've gotten through denial now, I'm going to work on step two. It's like,
Mhm.
no, because the denial wasn't the hard part for me at first, right? That wasn't it. The denial came later, and then I had to deal with that all over again multiple times. Um, but yeah, there are stages to grief. Yeah, you're going to deal with all of them, and you're going to be really sad. You're going to be bargaining with God or the universe, and trying to get that person back, and you're going to blame yourself. And those are normal emotions that come with grief. If you acknowledge that it's just real, and your baby's going to suffer the same way, and they're going to go through denial, even a small child, they're going to blame themselves. They don't know why that person
Mhm.
has gone. Did they do something or say something or not say something? And if you're back to the community, as a church or as a group or as a neighborhood, um, when you have a family that loses someone or goes through a great trauma, um, you can be there for them by telling them that you're there for them, by understanding that and not forgetting that they exist. I don't know if you know it, but every time someone loses someone, the people that all show up at the funeral, they're done now, right? Because they can't deal with that anymore. They're going to go home and hope that you get over it by yourself, because they don't want to have to talk to you again. You stop being invited to church group.
Mm.
You stop being invited to, bunko or whatever it is, to dinner out with the girls on a Friday night, because you got to bring grief with you, and they really don't like him, right? So you kind of get ostracized by the people that were your support group. So as a community, we need to remember that the grieving person still needs that. They still need to be happy. They still need to be invited. Are they going to bring some baggage with them? Yeah, for a while. Yeah, they are. But it's okay, because when you have it happen to you, you're welcome to bring your baggage too.
Yeah, I mean, the description that you're giving almost tells me that, not only is the person that is immediately impacted by the grief or the trauma going through the scars process, but all of their friends are too. They need to be adaptable
Yeah,
to the experience somebody else is doing. They need to be resilient to constantly hear is that this is going to come back up. It's going to
I
come
know.
back up in a month, in a year. It's going to come back up. I need to be able to
Sure.
work with my friend and be supportive of them through that journey.
Yeah,
So it sounds like everybody needs these skills. It's not just
everybody.
one person.
If you're a business owner, you need to scar proof your business before a tragedy happens. It's almost like getting insurance, is what I tell people. You need to trauma proof your job. So have that other person that's going to take care of the bills, the person that's going to talk to the customers and clients for the first few weeks or so, or however long it takes. Have that kind of in place already. Um, Nothing happens, great, great.
Hmm.
But if something does, you've at least got that taken care of. I just about lost my entire business when my son was killed. I ended up selling most everything out, going back to college and then getting back in, which was great, but it wasn't what I had planned.
Hmm.
But I just didn't have that support. I bounced around from church to church, from group to group. It just wasn't pretty.
Yeah, but that
I,
must be all too common, unfortunately, is that, it's without having all of these skills and the support is that happens. And I would imagine that most businesses go with assumptions. They're guessing what you need instead of just being
do.
open and talking about it and just saying, how can I support you? What is it that you're needing out of us right now?
Sure. When Mary comes back to work after 2 weeks after her son has been killed, it doesn't mean that Mary's better now and she can go back to work as normal. It means that Mary needs something normal back in her life.
Hmm.
But she's still going to need some extra help for a while. So that's something every employer should think about. How I feel about neurodiversity in the workplace. It's
Yep.
we are way past awareness, right? Now it's
Hmm.
acceptance. Just
Yep.
make room for us because here we come. And that's how I feel about grief also.
Yeah.
That we're forgetting that this employee is not going to come back and be business as usual. It's going to take a little bit of time, and that's okay. Have a
And
have a plan for that.
absolutely. And that inclusion component, I think, is really important because oftentimes scars are sometimes invisible. You don't know what somebody's experiencing outside of the environment I mean, you're not living their day-to-day life. So when you see somebody where there's a change in their personality, a change in the way that they're interacting with you, there's probably contributing factors where we need to empathize, we need to sympathize, we need to understand it's okay to ask questions sometimes just to be able to allow them to be
Are
able
you
to
good?
share what they're capable of.
Are you good? Do you need anything?
Hmm.
You know, how was your day today? Do you need any help? Any little thing is okay. Any little nothing is not okay. When someone loses someone or they go through rape or a violent accident, even the brain rewires a little bit. It kind of like everything goes haywire. It starts rewiring a bit, and the people that you cared about for some reason you're not really caring about them. Your habits change. Your eating habits change. The whole world just goes bonkers for a little while, and that pretty much happens to anybody who's gone through trauma, you know, PTSD in some cases, but always trauma. You will get back to that normal eventually. Some relationships may never mend from it, but just knowing that your friend or your coworker, your boss, in my case, I was the boss, right? I was coming back and, oh, weird. You know, the girls sent me home a couple of times, like, I don't think you're ready to come back to the office yet, Sylvia. It's like home. But that was out of love. But knowing that person changed a little bit, and it's okay. Part of it's going to be permanent,
Hmm.
much of it's going to be temporary, and they're going to go through whatever stages it is they're going through in the amount of time that it takes them. If it seems too long to you, sorry, there's no set time for grief. And depending on the level of love for that person, the last thing you should ever say is, it's been 6 months, what's wrong? It's like, really, you think?
But
Don't say that.
no,
It does
absolutely.
get
And I
better.
mean,
It does get better, but you can't put a time frame on the loss.
no, and you can't expect somebody is going to experience it the way that you might. And you have to be open to the fact that everybody's going to do it slightly different. And this
Very
kind of goes to you've done so much of utilizing your personal experience through trauma, through grief, to be able to dive deep into the subject and become a professional that has so much experience and expertise. But you also, and maybe this is a pivot to your new project that you're working on, but you've now combined autism into that. And tell us
I
a
have.
little bit about that.
Well, so I've been writing this book for a while, and I was getting towards the end of the research, and I was trying to resolve some of the things of my childhood in the book, because I couldn't resolve them. I was like, okay, I've hit this point. Why was I abused? Why did my mother never, I never held her hand one time that I can remember, not one time. And why was I bullied in grade school? Why didn't I seem to have any friends? I kind of took my own life into my hands in high school and joined everything. I ran for student council president when no one else wanted it, and became a little bit, I had 3 years of like semi popularity, right? It was kind of fun. I got out of high school and it went right back to the same way it was before those 3 years. I was abused. Had an abusive, verbally and emotionally abusive husband. My first person I fell in love with cheated on me. Her ring was bigger than mine, and we were, yeah, it's a long story. But I just go through one after another. One of my employers knew I had an abusive husband, and he decided that he would sexually abuse me. And so I had to quit there, and I was just running my whole life, right? And I thought I'd gotten myself to a point in my life. It's like, okay, I've got a real estate company, and I've got people that want to work for me, and I don't cork them out every day. And then I lost Jacob. I had just survived cancer to have Isaac. I was told I was going to die before he was ever born, and survived that. And, of course, I had Daniel after that. So I'd been through all of these losses and just kind of come through that other side, but I could never qualify it. I couldn't quantify it. Why was my life so different? And so as I was ending my research on my mom, Asperger's kept coming up, conversations we'd had with family and friends, why was her IQ so high and she was so weird, but we loved her all the same. And my brother got on the phone with me and he said, oh yeah, I've always known mom has got Asperger's, or had Asperger's. And for me, that was, I knew what it was. I didn't live in a box. I knew what autism was. I'd literally donated 3 years as a teenager going to Camp Maryland in Northern Kentucky for special needs children, many autistic, and had given my time. So I totally understood what that meant. Asperger's was, for my mom, made sense. And I said, I'm just like her. I spoke when I was a baby. I spoke sentences as a baby. Before I could walk, I could talk. I spoke French by the age of 2 on top of English, and I parroted anything anyone said. And I was just a quirky little kid. I chewed my nails. I picked skin. I pulled my hair, and had, just physical things that I had to do to get through events of my life. I was a walking, talking autism dictionary, and no one noticed. No one. Because I just looked normal coming out of my family. But so I got the diagnosis last year, as a matter of fact, and autism. And the 2 professors that diagnosed me said, you can make a difference. Your book is good, and you could actually make a difference. And so that was a autistic challenge. Is like, yes, and now I will be an expert in that. So that began the writing of the book called Being Tizzy, or Autisme. God has a sense of humor. My nickname since I was a little baby was Tizzy. My brother couldn't say Elizabeth, which was my middle name, and called me Tizabeth. And then everybody started calling me Tizzy. And then my whole life I was Tizzy. Well, isn't that ironic that that's kind of a slang word for autism? God has a great sense of humor. And but that's what the book is going to be about. And I'm going to take people through that life as a child, some of the really horrific things that I went through as a little person, and getting lost all the time, falling all the time. I've had 3 concussions I'm aware of, and I know that I've almost died from several other falls as a small child. I fall here at the farm about once a year. But the comorbidities were all there. The dyslexia, why did I have trouble with some math problems and other things I just did in my head? Aphantasia, I know that's not a comorbidity of autism per se, but it added to the flavor of the ice cream, which I am. And but all of those things made sense, and they all fell into a final, like, here we go, 62 years later. I'm going to be 63 in January. This is who I really was. And I never knew. So my goal is to make a difference, to help children with grief, help parents get through that as well. It was a grieving process just to find out, oh, by the way, you go through the stages of grief when you find out you're autistic, and so does your family. They call you and say things like, Mom, we've talked about it. We don't think you're autistic. Maybe a little ADHD or something, but we're pretty sure you're not autistic. Well, that was a year ago, and now my son's like, I totally recant that. Sorry. So I take that back. But that was a grieving process for my family. My husband didn't want to believe it. He goes, "You're too smart to be autistic." I go, "Oh, really? Yeah. Tell that to Temple Grandin to her face.
Uh,
But we didn't, my family knew nothing about autism. We are now officially all experts on the subject.
Well, that's why it's so important to break down those stereotypes and just your willingness to do these self-exploration and sharing of the story, and then go back and research to understand the hows, the whys, and everything that kind of became your new story, who you are, and kind of grew that way. I think that's so important. There's a disproportionality of trauma for autistics. It's
It is.
they experience far more. They're more vulnerable at times, as generally speaking. And then also with processing of trauma is that we're all so unique. And if you have a perspective or you're processing things in a different way, it makes the experience of trauma so different that those around you have a hard time supporting you.
Yes.
And I think that your book will, I'm hoping, hit these two subjects. But I mean, is that kind of what you're aiming for, is being able to kind of really educate?
I really want people to reevaluate grief. It's not a problem; it's a process, and to really hone in on trying to pull yourself through to that other side where there's happiness, right? Because you can't go back and change something. You didn't do anything wrong. In most cases, you had nothing to do with what happened, right? And you've got to get yourself on the other side of that grief. I promise you, I've been through more than anyone I know. I've been through more grief. I've had more losses. Physically, as a child, I was hurt. Physically, as a teen, as a young adult, multiple relationships and abuse on one end or the other. And I just thought I was just unlucky. I was autistic. I was more vulnerable and very trusting. I had a tendency to get lost and wander off. So, those are things that autistic people, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, deal with. And we're very vulnerable. And I'm a klutz. That's part of who I am as an autistic person. I have motor skill issues. I was in the marching band. I became the field commander because I couldn't keep up with the marching. I can't line dance either. And I never got to be a cheerleader until the wrestling team decided that they needed some cheerleaders. You didn't have to be very good, just show up and just go wrestlers. And so that was my only time I was ever a cheerleader for the wrestling team. Because my coordination skills are bad. But and that caused me to have a lot of injuries. I broke a hip, falling, and I have a new hip, of course. Those types of things are just grief issues that a lot of autistic people are going to put up with through life. The vulnerability issue. Do you think the serial killer that followed me home, when he had a choice of all the people that were there, that he chose me? I was the little sheep, right? Yeah, and he was the wolf. I can't read people's emotions in their faces most of the time. I don't know if you're getting ready to ask me the time or try to kill me. I really can't tell much of the time. And that's a skill that I've never really been able to master. And that's probably gotten me in more trouble. and could I go back in time? Would it be different? Absolutely. Would my yes, definitely. Someone could have prepared me for those types of things, and I wasn't prepared.
No, and I think the professionals I mean, they're working on developing new skills to empower somebody through their life, but I think this is a missing piece. And I think it's a piece that I'm so glad that you're writing the next book to be able to fulfill. But what message would you give to those that are going through the grief process and trying to find their strength? Are there resources that you could be turning to that, are going to empower them to be able to continue to live their best lives?
Yes, I'm pushing my book, Gold Scars. Read that. There's other resources in there. I'm going to have some classes that you can just take online that we're going to offer. Some of those will be for free, some just a nominal to pay for the guy that's actually putting them together for me. But you can go through a grief recovery by yourself. You don't have to do this book or the study book with a group. You can do it alone. But I think you need to get started with the fact that you've got to acknowledge that you have grief. It's part of your life. I have a cartoon series called Being Tizzy. Tizzy is a little autistic child that we're working on. And grief is this little swirly blob that follows her around a lot of times during her life. And she just shows up, and that's how grief is. If you just acknowledge that grief's going to be there, You can't really make it go away. You can live in your grief, right? It's your grief. You get to live in it.
Mhm.
Not going to make it completely go away because it's going to turn into that beautiful scar. I know that sounds very analytical and an analogy, but it is true. You can start the process to acknowledge that you have grief, get yourself out of that. It takes a little strength, takes a little courage, but I've seen the alternative. I've been to people's houses talking to them about grief, and they don't want to heal. And until I convince them that it's time to start thinking about healing, mending, I can't get them past that first step. It has to be
Mhm.
some decision that you make because you haven't, Superman. All you get, Dorothy, click the heels. You literally have to say to yourself, I'm going to start working through this grief, and you call it what it is. You write it down. It's like, dear, and I don't mean send anybody a letter. I mean literally address the person that hurt you or the thing that happened to you, right? Dear person that attacked me when I was a teenager, I'm not going to think about this anymore. You're not going to bother me anymore. This situation, I'm moving forward. You have to literally make those statements to yourself to be able to push yourself forward.
Mhm.
That is part of the process. I hate to say it. You literally have to address them. I addressed all of them. I addressed the cancer. I addressed a baby that I lost when I was a teenager. I addressed that. I addressed everything that had happened to me in my life, my abusers, the people that hurt me as a young person. And I did that literally by writing it down what happened and facing it for the first time. That's
Well,
where the strength comes in. So
yeah.
is
And I
writing it
appreciate
down.
that.
So yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, just even having that first step of, how to start looking at it, and then just I think understanding, as you were talking through that, in my mind, I'm seeing, that person, Tizzy, walking with the blob behind her. But
Blue
that
ball.
blob is constantly changing shapes, and
Yeah.
Tizzy has some control
Sometimes
over
he's
what
really
that shape
little,
looks
and
like.
sometimes he's big, and sometimes he's
Yeah.
little.
Well, I think that just being able to kind of hear that and just know that there's so much to think about through all of these processes and in the moment and in the event. And just knowing that there are things to turn to and just reading something like Gold Scars to prepare yourself or having that comic strip to start talking about that with your children is so important. So thanks again, Sylvia. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.